Kombucha, a fizzy tart drink that has gained popularity in the last decade. It's a sweetened tea that is fermented by bacteria and yeast and comes in all kinds of flavors. It tastes great and is super simple to make. Let's make some. You'll need the following materials for your homemade kombucha: an electric kettle, half a cup of sugar, a bottle of Rise starter kombucha, a 1-quart jar, a 2-quart jar, measuring cups, water, 3 tea bags, and some utensils like a large spoon and tongs. First, we'll begin by growing a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast, otherwise known as a SCOBY. This is what performs the fermentation. We can do this by using refrigerated store-bought kombucha that contains live microorganisms and emptying it into a clean jar. Then cover it with some cheesecloth to keep bugs out and leave it in a dark place for 2 weeks. Ta-da! A nice thick SCOBY is only possible with cellulose production. Cellulose is the structural component of SCOBY that gives it that characteristic firm and gelatinous texture. Live bacteria within the kombucha produce fibrils of cellulose that anchor microorganisms at the surface of the kombucha. Over time, the SCOBY adds new layers of cellulose on top of the older ones until it forms that thick mat at the top. Next, we need to steep the tea with 500 milliliters of boiled water for 5 minutes. Tea gives it a nice flavor, but also provides a source of nitrogen for the SCOBY. After 5 minutes, remove the tea bags, or if you used loose leaf tea, strain it through some cheesecloth and put it into a clean jar. Then add sugar and mix until dissolved. Because the SCOBY is sensitive to high temperatures, we need to add 400 milliliters of cool water and let it cool down for an hour before adding it into the mixture. Acidity is crucial to having successful and safe kombucha. Backslopping, which is the process of adding already fermented starter liquid to a new ferment, will drop the pH of the kombucha rapidly, and this prevents the growth of pathogenic and spoiling organisms in the early stages of fermentation. Add 100 milliliters of the old kombucha in which the SCOBY grew. Now you can place the SCOBY on the surface of the mixture. It's time to let it ferment for 7 days in a clean, cool, dark place. In the next week, the yeast and bacteria within the SCOBY contribute to the development of kombucha through 3 biochemical processes. The added sugar, which is composed of sucrose, fuels the fermentation and will be broken down by yeast into monosaccharides, glucose, and fructose, making it more accessible to them. Then, in the absence of oxygen, the yeast will ferment fructose into ethanol and carbon dioxide through a process called alcoholic fermentation. The carbonation as a result of carbon dioxide production is a desirable byproduct and makes the kombucha fizzy. Lastly, through the process of oxidative fermentation, acetic acid bacteria use ethanol to produce acetic acid strictly in the presence of oxygen. This process lowers the ethanol content of the kombucha, making it a non-alcoholic beverage. The kombucha is now ready to be enjoyed. With every ferment, the bacteria within the SCOBY will continue producing new layers of cellulose. If you peel them apart, then you can have many SCOBY babies to infinitely make kombucha. Go wild!